Neustadt, a small industrial town nestled in the Harz Mountains of Germany, was known for its coal mines, timber production, and the persistent fog that shrouded its narrow streets for most of the year. But in the autumn of 1873, the town became known for something else entirely. A case so disturbing that records of it were sealed by municipal order for nearly a century. Of the 16 women admitted to Neustadt Sanatorium for female nervous disorders that October, only 7 would ever return to their families. 3 died of natural causes, according to official documents. 6 simply vanished from all records. And 1, Emma Richter, became the subject of what may be the most unsettling medical file ever hidden from public view. The leather-bound journal of Dr. Heinrich Voller, chief physician at Neustadt, was discovered in 1967 during renovations of the old administrative building. Its pages, yellowed and brittle, contained detailed observations written in a steady hand that grew increasingly erratic in the final entries. The last 15 pages had been torn out. The municipal court ordered the journal sealed again, accessible only to medical historians with special permission. Even today, portions remain redacted. Would you believe that science, not superstition, not religious mania, could drive respected doctors to order a body buried without examination against every protocol of their profession? Are you prepared to confront what happened in that institution, where ambition masqueraded as progress, and where Emma Richter became something her doctors could no longer recognize as human? Neustadt in 1873 was a town caught between centuries. The cobblestone streets were now lit by gas lamps, but old women still gathered herbs in the surrounding forests at dawn. The telegraph office transmitted messages with modern efficiency, while the town council consulted ancient weather patterns before planting season. It was a place where science and folklore existed in uneasy proximity, like neighbors who no longer spoke but shared a common wall. The sanatorium stood at the edge of town, a 3-story structure of dark stone with high windows and a wrought iron gate. Built originally as a tuberculosis hospital, it had been converted in 1868 to address what many physicians of the era called the female nervous epidemic, the alarming increase in women diagnosed with hysteria, melancholia, and nervous exhaustion. Dr. Heinrich Voller, a graduate of the University of Heidelberg and former assistant to the renowned neurologist Wilhelm Griesinger, had been recruited to establish the institution as a center for progressive treatment. The modern woman's mind, Dr. Voller wrote in his inaugural address, is particularly susceptible to disorder in these changing times. As women increasingly desire education and participation in civic life, their delicate nervous systems strain against natural limitations. Our duty is to restore them to tranquility through scientific intervention. The sanatorium quickly gained a reputation among wealthy families throughout the region. Daughters, wives, and sisters who displayed inappropriate independence, excessive emotion, or intellectual preoccupation were brought to Dr. Voller for his specialized treatments. His methods were initially considered innovative rather than controversial: controlled isolation, hydrotherapy, electrical stimulation, and his proprietary cerebral balancing therapy, the details of which he kept carefully guarded. Emma Richter arrived at Neustadt on October 17, 1873. The daughter of a successful textile merchant, she was 24 years old, unmarried, and according to her father's letter to Dr. Voller, increasingly difficult to manage. She had begun assisting with the family business accounts, displaying an aptitude for mathematics that her father found concerning and unnatural. When a suitable marriage was arranged with the son of a business associate, Emma had refused, declaring her intention to seek a position as a schoolteacher instead. "She reads excessively," her father wrote, "often late into the night. She has become argumentative, challenging my authority and expressing inappropriate opinions on political matters. Most disturbing, she has twice been discovered attempting to leave the house unaccompanied. I fear her mind has become dangerously overstimulated." Hermann Kleist, the groundskeeper at Neustadt, was the first to notice something unusual about the new patient. Unlike most women who arrived weeping or sedated, Emma Richter walked through the iron gates with her head high, carrying a small valise and asking clear, direct questions about the institution's schedule and rules. Kleist, who had worked at the sanatorium since its opening, later told his wife that the young woman's eyes reminded him of a winter hawk, sharp and watching everything. 2 days after Emma's arrival, Kleist was trimming hedges near the East Wing when he observed Dr. Voller and his assistant, Dr. Werner Schiller, escorting Emma to the basement laboratory. This was unusual. Patients were typically not permitted in the research facilities. More unusual still was what Kleist observed that evening. Lights burning in the laboratory until dawn, and the distinct sound of a woman's voice, not crying as he often heard from the patient rooms, but speaking steadily, methodically, as if giving a lecture. Kleist reported what he had seen to Mrs. Bertha Grunewald, the head nurse. She dismissed his concerns, reminding him that gardeners who gossiped about medical matters could easily be replaced. That night, Kleist woke to find his dog barking frantically at the window facing the sanatorium. Through the glass, he could see a single light moving behind the windows of the East Wing laboratory, as if someone were walking with a lantern. The next morning, deep tire tracks led from the rear delivery entrance out toward the forest road. When Kleist mentioned these observations to Dr. Schiller, the young physician paled visibly. "You're mistaken," he said sharply. "There was no activity last night. And Herr Kleist, I would advise you to focus on your plants and forget any imagined sightings, for your own security here." But Kleist couldn't forget what he had seen, nor the conversation he overheard 3 days later between the doctors as they walked the grounds. Dr. Voller's voice carried clearly in the cold air. "She cannot possibly know these things. The implications are either extraordinary or terrifying. There is no middle ground." The first patients to undergo transformation were 3 women diagnosed with severe hysteria. They had been housed in the West Wing, their daily screaming fits and convulsions a source of disruption. After 2 weeks of Dr. Voller's new therapy, they returned to the general ward profoundly altered. They sat quietly in the day room, hands folded, eyes focused on middle distance. They followed instructions without question. They no longer received visitors by Dr. Voller's orders. "The treatment has been remarkably successful," Nurse Grunewald told the staff. "Their nervous systems have been properly recalibrated." But Margareta Bauer, a junior nurse who had been at Neustadt for only 6 months, noticed disturbing details. The women no longer responded to their names unless directly addressed. They showed no recognition of family members glimpsed through doorways during visiting hours. Most unsettling, they sometimes spoke in unison, using identical words and gestures, though they were housed in separate rooms at night. When Nurse Bauer attempted to engage them in simple conversation, asking about their hometowns or families, they would stare at her blankly before replying with non sequiturs about the pattern or the connection beneath. One morning she discovered all 3 standing at their windows at dawn, foreheads pressed to the glass, whispering something she couldn't quite hear. When she moved closer, they turned in perfect synchronization and smiled with empty eyes. "They aren't cured," Nurse Bauer confided to Kleist during a chance meeting in the kitchen garden. "They're gone. Whatever they were before, it's been hollowed out." Block 2. Emma Richter was scheduled for her first treatment on October 23rd, but something unprecedented occurred. Dr. Voller postponed the procedure after their initial consultation, instead spending hours with Emma in his private office. Staff passing by reported hearing not the usual one-sided clinical interrogation, but what sounded remarkably like a genuine dialogue. Later that evening, Dr. Voller was seen carrying books from the medical library to Emma's room, an extraordinary breach of protocol. "She asks questions no patient should ask," Dr. Schiller confided to Nurse Grunewald. "And worse, the doctor answers her. I've never seen him so fascinated by a patient. It's unnatural. For 6 days, Emma Richter remained untreated but extensively interviewed. Dr. Voller took copious notes during these sessions, filling 3 notebooks with observations. In his journal he wrote, "Subject R demonstrates remarkable cognitive functions. Her understanding of physiological principles, despite no formal education in medicine, borders on intuitive. Most concerning is her ability to extrapolate conclusions from limited information, as if she can see connections invisible to ordinary minds." On the 7th day, Emma was finally escorted to the basement laboratory. Unlike other patients who went under sedation, she walked down willingly, engaged in animated conversation with Dr. Voller about what she called the luminous pathways of the mind. The treatment lasted 14 hours. When Emma emerged, supported between Dr. Voller and Dr. Schiller, Nurse Bauer observed that the doctors looked exhausted, almost shaken, while Emma appeared merely thoughtful, her eyes alert and focused. "Did you observe the divergence?" Emma asked Dr. Voller as they passed through the corridor. "When the current reached the temporal region, did you see how the pattern shifted?" The doctor hushed her quickly, glancing nervously at Nurse Bauer. Later that night, the nurse overheard Dr. Schiller arguing vehemently with Dr. Voller in the office. "It's not working on her the way it should," Schiller insisted. "We must increase the intensity." "No," Voller replied. "She's different. Don't you understand what we might learn from her? She's experiencing the procedure consciously. No subject has ever remained aware during cerebral balancing. That's precisely what concerns me." Schiller hissed. "No one should remain conscious through that level of stimulation. It's not possible, unless something is fundamentally different about her neural structure." The treatments continued, increasing in duration. After each session, Emma returned to her room and filled dozens of pages with writing and intricate diagrams. Dr. Voller collected these pages each morning, studying them with growing excitement and apprehension. Nurse Bauer, assigned to monitor Emma's physical condition, noted that despite the grueling procedures, the patient showed none of the usual after-effects: no headaches, no memory gaps, no confusion. Instead, Emma seemed increasingly focused, her movements more deliberate, her gaze more penetrating. She began to predict small events moments before they occurred: a dropped tray in the dining hall, a sudden change in weather, the exact words someone was about to speak. The other patients grew uncomfortable in her presence, claiming she could see inside their heads. Then came the incident with Elizabeth Weiss, a long-term patient who had undergone cerebral balancing 3 months earlier. Elizabeth had been a model of the treatment's success: docile, compliant, emotionally neutral. One afternoon in the day room, Emma approached her, studied her face intently, then placed her hand gently on Elizabeth's forehead. "You're still in there," Emma whispered. "I can see you trapped behind your eyes." Elizabeth, who had not spoken a voluntary word in weeks, suddenly screamed, a raw, desperate sound that seemed to come from some profound depth. She seized Emma's wrists, her face contorting with effort as she gasped, "Help us! They've put something in our heads. It watches through our eyes." Within seconds, orderlies separated them. Elizabeth was immediately taken to the isolation ward, while Emma was escorted calmly back to her room. That night, strange sounds emerged from the isolation ward, not Elizabeth's voice, but a low, rhythmic tapping that continued for hours before abruptly stopping at dawn. When Nurse Bauer checked on Elizabeth the next morning, she found the woman sitting perfectly still on her bed, staring at the wall. The violent emotion of the previous day had vanished completely. When asked about the incident with Emma, Elizabeth tilted her head in an oddly mechanical gesture and replied, "Emma Richter does not exist." Dr. Voller's journal entries grew increasingly fragmented after this incident. He described Emma as evolving beyond predicted parameters, and noted with both excitement and alarm that she had begun to demonstrate knowledge she couldn't possibly possess. Detailed anatomical information, complex mathematical formulas, and references to research papers published only in obscure European medical journals to which the sanatorium did not subscribe. Most disturbing were Emma's drawings, which began as recognizable anatomical sketches of the human brain, but gradually transformed into elaborate, asymmetrical patterns that Dr. Voller described as reminiscent of electrical circuits, but organized according to some alternative logic I cannot decipher. By early November, Emma's influence had spread beyond her own case. She was observed whispering to other patients during meal times or in the brief periods when they gathered in the day room. Patients who spoke with Emma subsequently refused treatments or began asking disruptive questions about their conditions. 2 attempted to access the laboratory. Another was caught trying to send a letter describing the sanatorium's methods to a newspaper in Berlin. Dr. Schiller advocated for Emma's immediate transfer to a more restrictive institution. Dr. Voller refused, insisting that her case represented a breakthrough in understanding the human mind. Their disagreement culminated in Schiller's resignation and hasty departure from Neustadt on November 10th. 3 days later, he was found dead in his Leipzig apartment, the official cause listed as cerebral hemorrhage, though rumors suggested his research notes were missing and his expression in death was one of profound terror. Meanwhile, Marie Wagner, a patient who had arrived at Neustadt severely depressed and nearly catatonic, emerged as Emma's closest confidant. The 2 women were frequently seen with their heads together, Emma speaking intently, while Marie nodded and occasionally made notes on a small pad she kept hidden in her sleeve. Unlike the other patients influenced by Emma, Marie displayed no outward resistance to the sanatorium's routines, submitting to treatments and following rules with apparent compliance. What no one realized was that Marie had become Emma's instrument, memorizing information, collecting small items, observing staff patterns, and documenting everything she saw in a tiny, precise handwriting on papers hidden inside the lining of her nightgown. While Emma was increasingly monitored and restricted, Marie moved about the sanatorium almost invisibly, her previous insignificance now her greatest asset. On November 18th, during a heavy snowstorm that had confined most staff to quarters adjacent to the sanatorium, Emma was scheduled for what Dr. Voller termed in his journal the final integration procedure. Marie was seen bringing Emma a cup of tea an hour before the treatment. When orderlies came to escort Emma to the laboratory, they found her sitting calmly on her bed, hands folded in her lap, eyes closed as if in meditation. "I'm ready now," she told them with a slight smile. "I understand everything." The procedure began at midnight. Only Dr. Voller, who had dismissed his assistant for the evening, was present with Emma in the laboratory. The newly installed electrical generator hummed steadily, its sound carrying through the empty corridors. At approximately 2 in the morning, Nurse Bauer, making her rounds, heard a woman's laughter echoing from the basement. Not hysterical or frightened, but clear and triumphant. At sunrise, the laboratory door remained locked. When staff finally forced entry at Dr. Voller's failure to appear for morning rounds, they found the room in disarray, equipment toppled, papers scattered, and an acrid smell of burned metal in the air. Dr. Voller sat at his desk, alive but unresponsive, staring at the wall with vacant eyes. Of Emma Richter, there was no sign. Block 3. The disappearance of Emma Richter triggered an immediate but curiously constrained investigation. Town officials arrived at Neustadt by midday, led by Police Commissioner Friedrich Keller, a cousin of Dr. Voller's by marriage. The commissioner interviewed staff briefly, examined the laboratory, and declared the matter an unfortunate case of patient escape, likely resulting in death by exposure given the severe weather. The case was officially closed within 48 hours. No search parties were organized. No notices were posted. Emma Richter's father was informed by letter that his daughter had succumbed to complications of her nervous condition, and that her remains had been respectfully interred in the sanatorium cemetery as a precaution against contagion. He accepted this explanation without question and declined to visit the grave. But Marie Wagner knew the truth. On the night of Emma's disappearance, she had been watching from a storage room window that overlooked the service entrance. Shortly before dawn, she observed two groundskeepers carrying a long bundle wrapped in canvas toward a waiting carriage. The bundle moved, and just before they loaded it into the vehicle, Marie glimpsed a pale hand emerge from the wrapping, a hand that formed a deliberate gesture she recognized, one that Emma had taught her, signifying, "The path is open." The carriage departed not toward the cemetery, but in the direction of the railway station. Marie, following the plan she and Emma had meticulously developed over weeks, waited 3 more days before implementing her part of their design. Dr. Voller, meanwhile, remained in a state unlike anything the medical staff had encountered. Physically, he was uninjured. He ate when fed, followed simple commands, and maintained normal bodily functions. But his consciousness seemed profoundly altered. He spoke only in fragmented sentences, often repeating phrases that made little sense to his colleagues. The pattern extends beyond. She mapped the invisible currents. We never understood what we were touching. Most disturbing were the moments when he would suddenly focus, staring intently at whoever stood before him, and ask with desperate urgency, "Do you see them too? The threads connecting everything, they've always been there. She showed me how to see." On November 23rd, Dr. Anton Brenner arrived from Berlin to assess Dr. Voller's condition and assume temporary leadership of the sanatorium. A renowned neurologist with connections to government ministries, Dr. Brenner reviewed Voller's journals and research notes, examined the laboratory equipment, and interviewed key staff. Within days, he implemented a strict information protocol. All discussion of Emma Richter or recent events was forbidden. Patient treatments were suspended, and communication with the outside world was severely restricted. "What we are dealing with," he informed the assembled staff, "is a case of intellectual contagion." Dr. Voller's work, while innovative, ventured into dangerous theoretical territory. His condition and the behavioral changes in certain patients result from this misguided exploration. The ministry has classified all related information as medically sensitive. Discussing these matters outside this institution will be considered a criminal offense against public health. On the night of November 26th, Marie Wagner enacted her escape. Having methodically documented the night watchman's routine, she slipped out through the kitchen during his regular cigarette break. In her room, she left behind a carefully staged scene suggesting suicide, a bed made to look like a body with a note expressing despair. By the time her absence was discovered the following morning, Marie was already on a train to Hamburg, carrying with her the most damning evidence of the sanatorium's activities. Emma's hidden journals, diagrams, and a small brass device of unusual design that Emma had somehow constructed from components stolen from the laboratory. In Hamburg, following Emma's detailed instructions, Marie made contact with Dr. Elise Schrader, one of the few female physicians in Germany and a vocal critic of institutional treatments for female nervous disorders. To Dr. Schrader, Marie delivered Emma's journals and testimony about the procedures at Neustadt. The physician was initially skeptical, but upon examining Emma's technical drawings and reading her theoretical notes, her demeanor changed to one of shocked recognition. "This goes beyond anything I imagined," Dr. Schrader whispered, studying a particular diagram with trembling hands. "If what she describes is accurate, Voller wasn't treating these women. He was attempting to rewire their neural pathways according to some external pattern. But the technique it's decades beyond current medical understanding." When Marie described Emma's progressive transformation, her increasing cognitive abilities, her strange new awareness, her eventual escape, Dr. Schrader's scientific skepticism battled visibly with growing alarm. "And you believe she succeeded?" the doctor asked. "That she completed this integration herself, but in a way Voller hadn't anticipated?" She said the current could flow both ways. Marie replied simply. He thought he was imprinting a pattern on her mind. He didn't realize she was simultaneously reading the source of his pattern. Doctor. Schrader arranged for Marie to stay with colleagues in Denmark, safely beyond the reach of German authorities. She then attempted to bring Emma's documentation to the attention of the Berlin Medical Society. 3 days later, her clinic was raided by police under the pretext of investigating unlicensed medical practice. All of Emma's materials were confiscated. Dr. Schrader herself narrowly escaped arrest, fleeing to Switzerland where she lived under an assumed name until her death in 1902. Back at Neustadt, the consequences unfolded with quiet efficiency. The sanatorium was temporarily closed for renovation. When it reopened 3 months later under new leadership, the basement laboratory had been completely dismantled, its equipment and records removed. The eastern wing, where Emma and the other experimental subjects had been housed, remained permanently sealed. Dr. Woller was transferred to a private institution near Munich, where he lived another 17 years without ever regaining his former cognitive function, though attendants noted his habit of drawing the same intricate pattern repeatedly on any available surface. The most unsettling development occurred 6 months after Emma's disappearance. A young physician at University Hospital in Vienna published a revolutionary paper on neural electricity and its potential applications in treating mental disorders. The techniques he described bore striking similarities to Woller's experimental procedures, but refined and expanded in ways that suggested profound new understanding. When questioned about his sources, the physician claimed the insights had come to him like a revelation after a chance encounter with an unnamed woman who had discussed theoretical neurology with him in a cafe. He could recall nothing about her appearance, except for unusually intense eyes that seemed to see through rather than at you. Similar accounts emerged over the subsequent decade. Medical researchers, physicists, and mathematicians reporting breakthrough insights after brief encounters with a soft-spoken woman who asked penetrating questions about their work. The woman was never identified, her descriptions varying widely, but one detail remained consistent. She carried a small brass device that she sometimes consulted, described variously as a unique timepiece or a specialized scientific instrument. In 1897, a sealed package arrived at the home of Marie Wagner in Copenhagen. It contained no letter, only an object wrapped in silk, a perfect miniature replica of the brass device she had carried from Neustadt years earlier. Inscribed on its base were the words, "The pattern extends. We are connecting." The Neustadt sanatorium operated until 1916, when a fire of unknown origin destroyed the main building. Excavation of the ruins revealed something the renovation crews had missed years earlier. Beneath the sealed eastern wing, a second laboratory had been constructed, accessible only through a concealed entrance in Dr. Woller's former office. The equipment found there was described as unlike any known medical apparatus and was quietly removed by government officials before independent experts could examine it. The official report concluded that Dr. Heinrich Woller, once considered a pioneer in neurological treatment, had ultimately fallen victim to professional obsession and delusion. His experimental procedures were deemed unethical failures based on flawed understanding of the female nervous system. The case was considered closed, the record sealed to prevent damage to the reputation of German medical science. But perhaps the most chilling epilogue came in 1924, when workmen digging a new foundation near the former sanatorium site discovered a small metal box buried 6 feet below ground. Inside was a journal written in Emma Richter's distinctive hand, dated 2 weeks after her disappearance. Its final entry read, "They believed they were advancing science by reshaping our minds to match their pattern. They never understood that they were merely crude instruments themselves, preparing receptive vessels for something seeking expression through human consciousness. I was not the first to glimpse it, but I am the first to embrace it fully. Now I understand my purpose: to find others who can carry the pattern, to connect the nodes across continents and generations. What awakened in me that night is patient. It thinks in centuries. The journal was submitted to local authorities, who forwarded it to the National Archives in Berlin. It was catalogued, stored in the restricted medical documents section, and promptly forgotten. Just another curiosity from an age when science had sometimes overreached its understanding in the name of progress. In the decades that followed, the story of Emma Richter faded into obscurity, remembered only as a footnote in obscure medical histories. But sometimes, even today, researchers working on neural interface technology or consciousness mapping report strange dreams of a woman with intense eyes, showing them patterns that seem to exist just beyond conventional understanding. Blueprints for a connection that spans not just minds but time itself. When human arrogance mistakes discovery for creation, wrote one such researcher in his private journal, we become unwitting conduits for something that has always been waiting for us to evolve enough to perceive it.